is our last panel of today. We're going to discuss policy implementation in California, what we've done right, what we've shared, and what we can do to continue to improve. I'm very excited about this. To leading the conversation, we've got Sigrid Wright, the CEO of the Community Environmental Council. I had the joy of working with Sigrid at CEC for 7 years, and it's fun to watch her take the lead. For those of you who don't know CEC, they are a nonprofit advancing clean energy and climate resilience and community-based environmental solutions. They've been doing this for how many years now, Sigrid? 30, how many years? CEC, remind me. 55 years, so long time. Sigrid herself has been at the helm for more than a decade and making progress on renewable energy.
Recording in progress.
There we go. We're back. Hi, Zoom friends. Sorry we lost you. Had a little power problem, but we haven't started yet. We're just getting started on our California Clean Energy panel, and I'll turn over to Sigrid from there. So thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Megan. Well, I am thrilled to be leading this conversation. You know, I work for the little CEC, the Community Environmental Council. We always say that we're the little CEC. And our model, our change model, is that by being based here in California, we have outsized influence, as if compared to if we were in some other Raleigh or Kentucky. And I don't mean to pick on those communities, but we just have outsized influence, being in the 4th largest economy in the world. Because when California makes a move, it changes markets. We've talked about that a little bit today. We talked about LED light bulbs changing the market. Solar changed the market. Happening now, electric vehicles. We gotta lean in a little bit more on electric vehicles to change the market here. So I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm going to introduce my panelists, but they are all overachievers, and so I'm going to just say, if you want their bios, look in your program, please, or look them up. But David Hochschild is the chair of the California Energy Commission. Christina, well, we've shifted seats here, but Bernadette Del Chiaro is Environmental Working Group, formerly Cal Solar and Storage Association. Alelia is a friend of mine here, City of Santa Barbara, Sustainability and Resilience Director. And Christina Snider-Ashtari, Tribal Affairs Secretary, Office of Governor Gavin Newsom. So, sorry, we switched chairs a little bit here. But I am, so let's talk about what other states or cities realistically can replicate from California, and what can't they? And David, I'm going to look at you first.
Yeah, well, first of all, what a wonderful day. And I just want to, can we give it up for the organizers here? What a wonderful, inspiring gathering. I just really enjoyed the folks who are here. So let me just begin with let's do just a very quick tour of what's actually happening in California clean energy. It is amazing. We're at almost 70% of our electricity on the grid today in California coming from clean sources. Alternative energy is the wrong word to use to describe renewables in California. Fossil's alternative. We have deployed 32 gigs of clean capacity just since Gavin Newsom came to office. That's 30% of the entire grid capacity, right? So we're adding just a colossal amount of new capacity. Building now the largest battery project in the world, $5.5 billion project in Fresno County, 2.5 million electric vehicles. We have almost twice as many EV charge plugs as we have gasoline nozzles in California. And we're really doing the electrification of almost everything. So a decade ago, 1% of new construction was all electric. Today it's over 80%, and a whole bunch of super exciting stuff happening. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I think the biggest one, and the saying is, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment, right? So I think the biggest shortcoming we had is early on, having short-term policies. We'd have a solar rebate program for a year or two, then we'd run out of money. That is no way to build an industry. And so everything we're trying to do now is based on the philosophy of sustained, orderly development. So long-term, 20, 25-year goals that create certainty, and that leverages a lot of new investment to help bring clean energy mainstream and electrification mainstream. And so I think that's the main lesson to take from what has worked here. And I'll just close with this. As we launch. Really, 15 years ago was a big turning point when Jerry Brown came to office. His first piece of legislation was the 33% renewable portfolio standard. It really kickstarted large-scale renewables. And the critique we got from around the country, from hostile governors and others, this is going to crash your economy. Okay, so just to pause on what happened as we have radically decarbonized and invested in all these clean technologies. We were the 10th largest economy in the world at that time, and now we have passed Russia and Brazil and Italy and France and the UK and Japan. Now we're the 4th largest economy in the world, and it has, this has helped make California the destination state for clean energy investment. And so it's a real important pillar of our economic strength, not just environmental leadership. But I think that's the main thing to the take-home message is long-term stable policies are the way forward.
Bernadette, do you want to take that one?
I would love to. I have inspired by earlier speakers, Solar Sister and Winco Solar. I loved your story about last mile funneling first mile and the collaboration that comes from the grassroots up, from the bottom up. And this is one thing California has done incredibly well that is not only has been replicated around the country, but around the world as well. And it's a really fun story I want to share with you all. 50 years ago, some very scrappy hippies that were off-grid, living in the remotest parts of Northern California, driven by a very universal human desire for music, and specifically the need to play their Grateful Dead tapes, and also wanting to hang simple Christmas lights at Christmas time, figured out a way to commandeer abandoned solar panels from Arco Solar, the oil company that thought solar was going to be a big thing in the 70s and then abandoned it. They had these solar panels that were not being used. These entrepreneurial, scrappy folks in the north figured out where those panels were, took them back up north, plugged them into car batteries, and created some of the first off-grid homes. That was the origins of this incredible global solution that we're all talking about today. And you fast forward to the early 2000s, California faced with one of the biggest crises it had ever faced, brought about by Enron and others that manipulated our grid. And you have an Austrian bodybuilder turned movie star turned politician embrace this idea of the last mile being brought to the first mile. And we started to really, truly drive grid-tied rooftop solar and put this technology in the hands of everybody that we could. 20 years later, where we are today is we have built 10 nuclear power plants worth of rooftop solar. We drove demand, plummeted price, created a global scale market that everybody has benefited from. We have, for the first time in California's grid history, flatlined demand while growing our economy, as David just mentioned, and growing our use of electricity. We flatlined demand for the grid, which solved untold problems that we would have had we not deployed all that rooftop solar. And we're just getting started, but already we have the largest battery in the world. Nobody talks about it, but it's sitting in people's garages, hanging on the wall. And just think about what's over 4 wheels sitting in driveways, right? So California did this by investing in and caring about long-term policy, at least up until a certain point, and investing in individuals, capturing the capital that exists in our communities, feeding that money back in. All of the things that we've been talking about today, we did here in California. It's an incredible success story. Other states copied. We're seeing third world countries leapfrog over, right, and bring these microgrids and these solutions directly to some of the hardest to reach people. So it's an amazing story of innovation, of human sort of just creature comforts, but also just human spirit, and the ability through government policy cooperating with individual consumers to democratize energy. So we haven't done everything right. We have started to kind of slow and throttle that down, and we need to turn that around. We can talk about that maybe later. But just, I find hope in that story, and it's incredibly powerful. when we actually work with individual consumers and bring energy directly to them, because we solve so many problems that are unsolvable. As one of our speakers meant, they are more difficult to solve even at the city or state level, because these problems are so huge. So anyway, that's a story I wanted to share that I find really inspiring.
That's inspiring. Thank you. So let's talk about that. Bring that down to the city or community level. Christina, if you were advising a mayor or a city or a governor that's just starting today, what would be the first couple of moves?
Well, I'll give you some context. I have been advising who was a new governor about 7.5 years ago, Gavin Newsom, for the past several years on California tribal affairs, on Native American affairs, and on international indigenous policy. Before that, I was advising a 4-term governor in his 80s on the same thing. And so I think with both of them, what I would say first, and anybody else who would be engaging in this work, because we've heard that actually a lot of what needs to get done at the county level, at the city level, in order for anything that we've been doing at the state level to be effective, is to first figure out your give a shit factor, I think is what we're talking about. Why are you doing all of this? Like, is this, what is the reason why you wanted to be in this office? What did you hope to accomplish? And I think each governor that I worked for has a different reason for doing that. Jerry Brown had different reasons every time he ran, and they evolved over time and matured over time. Governor Newsom had a reason coming in that has evolved over his time in office, so we kind of re-examine that over time vis-a-vis tribal nations and indigenous issues. But really, with each elected official, what's the reason you're doing this? And if you have that reason, then we can reverse engineer how we do the policy in a way that feels authentic to who you are, so that when you go out into community, you're actually connecting with people in a way that's really authentic and actually is driven by your common core values. So the give a shit thing. The second thing is, I would say, meet with community, meet people where they're at, and meet with them on a government-to-government basis. So in California, we've got 109 federally recognized tribes. Some of you who are local to here may know about the Santa Ynez Chumash, who are a little bit inland from here, but are the local federally recognized tribe in the area. But each federally recognized tribe, for those who aren't aware, in the United States, you heard there's 575 now, is its own governmental unit with its own jurisdictional authority. And in California, that means, because every state has a little bit different, in California, that means the ability to regulate its own people and its own lands. And so 109 different islands of that. So meet with those tribal leaders on a government-to-government basis. They all have their own give a shit things. And so understand what they want to do, why they're doing it, and figure out how we can do that in partnership. We do that in this administration through an annual summit where the governor actually meets directly with all of the tribal chairs, the elected chairs of each tribe, because they change over time. Each tribe has different election cycles, so you kind of need to have an evergreen type of event so that that can be renewed constantly, and so that you can keep moving what that motivation is and what your goals are for the next year. So I would say figure out how to meet people where they are and craft policy based on that versus on the great idea you had sitting in your office in Sacramento or in the city that you're governing. And then the third thing I think is don't kind of clear the desk when you get there. Think about and listen to what has been working and figure out how you can build and capitalize on that in a way that represents your values as a leader. And so what I came in with Governor Brown was an executive order that basically mandated government-to-government consultation, because prior to that, tribes were undercapitalized. A lot of government resources were not there in California. And so his big policy priority was, we've actually got to work with tribes on a government-to-government basis. When Governor Newsom came in, we had a conversation about, well, what else could we do to build on this? And a lot of what I'd seen over the last year was that we'd be in meetings and government officials would come in acting like they own the place on a tribe's tribal lands in their government offices, and we would end up going 10 steps back trying to have a relationship with a tribe when we had people in the room that had no idea about the history, about tribal governance and tribal sovereignty. And so we would end up in these government to government meetings actually causing more harm between the relationships with the state and the tribes versus moving forward in a way that felt productive. So we had a conversation, and he, in kind of reflecting on everything he could do, thought it would be a great idea to apologize for this history. We have an awful history in California. You can look it up. There's lots of books now. We're issuing a report in a couple of months. But basically, there's this history of the state sanctioning large-scale genocide of California Indian people. So he started out by both in person at convening, bringing folks like David here from the state to witness this, but also personally apologizing to California tribal leaders from throughout the state for that history, and creating a mechanism to examine that history, and then issuing alongside that concurrently, but not in the in-person convening because it was much more about that human-to-human connection, an executive order that apologized for that history, charged all of our agencies with thinking through how we can do more based on this historical injustice to address it, and also upholding the executive order that Governor Brown had issued before, that we're still prioritizing these government-to-government relationships, but with the lens of addressing historical injustices. So I would say, for any new person coming in, see what's working, don't clear the desk, and build on it in the way that feels authentic to you and that you feel like could actually carve out a new path forward. So
That's really powerful. Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've been so we started by hearing what California is doing right and well and amazing, and it was inspiring. Both of you are very inspiring. And then we just talked here about how to kind of get started, and that among your suggestions is build on what's already been built, but also recognize historic harms. So I do want to kind of bring it down a bit further to the local level and talk about where California is falling short, where we have opportunity. What aren't we getting right? And Alelia, you are knee deep in it. And here's a city that has been at this for a while, and really you've got a lot of been making a lot of leadership and inroads. And so, what do you see? What do you see us needing to work on?
Thanks, Sigrid. So I think number one, paramount, energy affordability. We can't do anything until we fix that. I think this is not news to anyone. There are 16 affordability bills up at the legislature. Well, less now because they got quite a bit got killed yesterday in suspense. But how we get there is, I think, still very much a debate. Is it rate of return to the utilities? Is it resource adequacy? Is it solar programs? Is it public purpose funds, right? There's all these different elements of rate making that are creating this affordability crisis in California. I think from the local government perspective, beyond just people living paycheck to paycheck, we can't meet our decarbonization goals if we can't do it equitably. I am not comfortable saying you must electrify your home if it's going to increase your bills even more than they are today. So I think that's number one. We have to fix that. There's a lot of ways to get there. We are engaged as a city. We actually founded the Local Government Climate Alliance, which is an alliance of cities and counties around California, to gain some influence of the legislature and start saying, hey, we are the on-the-ground implementers. Start listening to us when you make laws. And it's actually working, so that's good. And then also, the other big thing is interconnection. We can't even build the renewables. The interconnection queue right now, which means how you actually get the power into the grid if you build a project, is 8 years. So you're requiring load-serving entities like Santa Barbara, we are our own community choice aggregator, to basically compete for resources that are finite. And we're creating this false supply and demand dichotomy that is really impacting rates. And so until we fix the interconnection problem, it should not take 8 years to interconnect a project. We really are going to struggle with this affordability issue.
Bernadette, you probably have a perspective on this as well. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. We need to fire on all cylinders to get to where we all need to go, and we're not quite there. One of the things that incredible story of the growth of distributed rooftop solar in California, what it has created is a very, very mainstream and diversified market. I have one fact that hopefully will stick in your head. Lawrence Berkeley National Labs has analyzed the data and the demographics of everybody who has gone solar in California. 56% of the people with solar panels on their roof are middle class, working class, or low income. We're talking firefighters, nurses, school teachers, and everybody in between. There are as many families that earn less than $50,000 a year with solar panels on their roof as there are families that earn over $250,000 a year. Have we gotten where we need to go? Absolutely not. But we have made tremendous strides. But unfortunately, the deeper we have penetrated the market, the more we have attracted opposition from our utility companies who have a financial sort of incentive to not want people to generate their own electricity. I was thinking about the gentleman from Louisiana that showed all those beautiful, and thank you for what you're doing, photos of those lighthouse projects. Great branding, I love it. Those in the eyes of PG&E and the other utilities, and in the tools that have been adopted by some of our state agencies, those would be negative energy resources in California. They would be buildings that are not paying enough money to the utility. We have inverted the story, and that inversion has sort of now started to take off like wildfire. This idea that realization of energy, self-control of energy, community-based power is a negative, and we should do it all in a centralized way through power plants located very far away, in which you're paying to the utility and you can't get out of it. We need to get that turned around. Otherwise, we will not meet our clean energy goals and our climate goals. And then on top of that, we won't meet the needs of ratepayers. 40% of California ratepayers struggle to pay their bill. Yet we have just throttled one of the most tried and true and definite ways to solve affordability, which is to allow people to generate their own electricity from the sun that falls on their roof. Or, as we're doing right now with SB 868, that falls on your balcony. We have a bill to unleash balcony solar. If you haven't heard of it, you can take those solar panels and you can just plug them into your outlet and immediately power your home or apartment. If you move, you take it with you. They're small and they're portable and they work. And no, they're not as amazing as microgrid systems. We need to do all of the above, but we need to equip every Californian with this incredible, miraculous technology. And we can do that, but we have to sort of get some of the self-interests in the old system. We need to have that stand down so that we can let the innovation and the consumer and the capital that needs to come from that flourish. Otherwise, we will fail to meet our goals, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'd love to just build on the good points Bernadette made. Just on affordability, really important to recognize it is a huge issue, but what is driving that? Okay, so LBNL just did a great study on this. The number one driver of rate increases in California is climate-driven wildfires. Okay, so rates were actually very stable from 2000 to about 2017, 2018 when we had these big wildfires. And all of a sudden you have this colossal expense of vegetation management, utility undergrounding, and its spike rates. As all of that went on the backs of ratepayers. And so you have this dynamic where climate change is making it harder to fight climate change, right? When electricity prices are high, that actually undermines the value proposition of an electric heat pump or an electric vehicle. But there is, the other side of the coin of that, there is a real, I think, salvation to the rates problem, which is electrification. Okay, so we estimate at the Energy Commission about $10 billion has been contributed by electric vehicle drivers to the rate base. So when you pay your monthly power bill, 2/3 of the cost of that is just fixed costs, okay, of your bill. So even if generation were free, you're still, the majority of that is just for, transmission, distribution, maintenance, upgrades, all that stuff. And you're spreading that cost over many more kilowatt hours as you increase demand. So sort of the answer to high rates is actually high load growth. And We're adding about 1,200 electric vehicles a day in California. We have 2.5 million on the road, and there's a whole bunch of great stuff coming. Oakland, California just became the first city in North America to fully electrify their school bus fleet. 74 buses, 74 chargers. You have class 4, 5, and 6 trucks. Harbinger in LA is doing an amazing job. You've got companies like FedEx made a commitment to get to 100% electric for their vehicle fleet by 2030. You have, in July, the Tesla semi-truck factory is opening. They're going to make 1,000 electric semi-trucks a week, 500-mile range. They recharge in 35 minutes, right? And then you even have electric aviation, which is a $6 billion industry in California. All of that is helpful for rates. And so kind of coupled with this discussion about solar, it's really important to recognize we can do solar, and we can do a lot of solar and rooftop solar with electrification, and it actually will work. And the final thing I'd say, we actually now require solar on all new construction, not just new homes. We're building about 120,000 new buildings a year in California. So every new school, every new commercial building, so we're getting about 1 gigawatt of solar a year just through the code. So that's another, I think, really important thing, because you end up saving a lot of money when you build it right the first time, right?
Yeah, when I talk about California, I talk about it as a climate lab. So both as a place where we're experiencing almost all, minus hurricanes perhaps, all of the severe climate threats, sea level rise, wildfire, extreme heat, drought, etc., but also the place where we can really pilot and then scale, put in policy and then scale up the solutions. So thank you all for leaning in on that question. We are at, we're in a conversation here today with Unite to Light about the global community. So I want to bring us back up for a second. We've been talking all day about various, what it means to be a good global citizen, whether that means supporting the organizations that are doing really great on the ground work, but also having an awareness about the impacts of AI or critical minerals. We've been talking about disaster resiliency, disaster recovery. So I just want to ask you all a question about what it means to be a global citizen in the clean energy transition, and what role each of us, or maybe the role that you can play in your roles to expand access to power worldwide. So I'm going to let whoever wants to take it first. Sure. We'll go down the line.
It's such become such an overused expression that it's almost trite, but act locally, think globally. California has done that. I told the story about just a handful of people thinking very, very locally, and how that actually spurred this incredible global market. I think the number one thing is California is a leader, and what we do matters. What David said is our economy, others have said it, but that means the weight of the world is a lot of ways on California's shoulders, and so we have to get it right. And that actually makes our job a little more difficult. So I think we are thinking globally when we get it right in Santa Barbara, in Los Angeles, and all throughout California. And if we don't, we run the risk of becoming a negative example, and then people lose hope. Hope is one of the most powerful motivators for humans. And I fear that if we don't get ourselves back on track, we might lose hope, and that will really harm our ability to solve these problems.
I think, I'm going to answer this question 2 ways. One as my role and the city's role, and one as y'all's role. So I think the city's role, and why we chose to do our own community choice aggregation program, most jurisdictions around the state banded together to have some herd immunity, more buying power, et cetera. Santa Barbara understood that we had the community and political will to be more ambitious. And we were the first CCA in the state to default to carbon-free power. And by doing that, diminished our carbon emissions by 20% overnight, right? And so we really led the way and continue to lead the way in the state to a carbon neutrality future. I think that my role as the Sustainability and Resilience Director and the director of the CCA is to continue to push those boundaries, to continue to offer community programs that prove a concept that can be then applied throughout the state, throughout the nation, throughout the globe. And I think that my political body, the city council, really believes in that, right? They believe that Santa Barbara has a duty, because we have this political will, to do these things. And so that is our role as the global citizen. Your role, I think, and this is very important, is to realize that you are not just a consumer of the electrical system or the energy system. You have agency in that as a voter, as a parent, as an employee of a company, as a resident. You have agency, and you should get involved both at the local and state level in policy making that will direct that resilient future. And so I say this to every high school group I talk to: go talk to your city council. They actually listen to you more than they listen to me. So you should, they listen to me too, but they listen to you very much. And so you should get involved. If this is important to you, you drive the conversation, and I highly recommend it.
I'm going to have a very similar answer, but in a different context. And so I think for us, at least in the tribal affairs space, we've been able to do a lot of things that have never been done before, either in the United States or across the globe. And so what we've done is leverage those successes, whether it's the investments over $160 million in tribal energy sovereignty, microgrids, just energy futures for California Indian people, or whether it's even just restoring traditional practices that were outlawed for California tribes throughout the state to address climate change. So we go and we engage in international spaces like COP, in other kind of MOU spaces. Tribes are part of all of our climate MOUs with places like New Zealand, Canada, Australia. So we work with tribes and their counterparts across the globe to make sure that they're seeing what we're doing in partnership with tribes, and how governments that are not tribes can get out of the way of tribes being able to do really cool projects, asserting their sovereignty and traditional knowledges and expertise that's been gained over several years of governing their own people. So replicability across the globe is something that we go and talk to people about. And then the other piece is that the governor, similarly, I think, to the electeds you're talking about, is very sensitive to the will of the people. And so the things that he can do is it's limited by what people are willing to do in their daily lives. And so we have to think about gas prices. We have to think about all of the things that everybody in their daily lives is thinking about. Is it $8 a gallon? That's not acceptable. And so we have to figure out how to actually meet people where they are. And so I would say, as individuals, your behaviors dictate how the governor and how your electeds will act. And so, we'll come back from a climate convening and we'll be like, wow, we can't be sourcing our oil from places that are impacting the Amazon. This is awful. We're seeing indigenous communities are being displaced. We're seeing desertification. This is not acceptable, and we shouldn't have this kind of outsized impact because of how we're sourcing our fuels. But at the same time, if everybody in California still wants to use those fuels and still has this energy demand and isn't demanding a shift to greener energies or to more ethical sourcing of rare earth minerals and the like, then we have a big problem there. So I would just say it's the same advice. Use your vote, use your voice. You dictate how the state moves, and I think that'll help us get to a better future for the globe.
Great. First of all, I just really want to give props to my friend Christina for her work. When the governor did the apology to the tribes, which was in June of his first year in office in 2019, that's the first apology of an American governor to tribes in this nation like that. And it created the space for us to do this $165 million for tribal energy sovereignty grants. And it really wouldn't have happened without you. So let's give it up for Christina. Thank you for leading the way and just being an amazing leader in your field. I want to answer your question with a story. So the reason I'm here today is because of Sarah Rossi, who was instrumental in funding a solar roof project I've been involved in at my friend's hospital in Burundi. My friend Deo has the most amazing life story of anybody I've met in my 54 years on this earth. He was a refugee from Burundi when the genocide happened in 93, 94, and was nearly killed by mobs with a machete. Came to the U.S. at a time when the U.S. was actually accepting refugees. Showed up in New York Kennedy Airport, spoke no English, had no place to stay, and knew nobody. Ended up meeting a baggage handler in the airport from Senegal that he could communicate with, stay with that guy. in Harlem for a few weeks, and then was homeless in Central Park in New York City for 5 months, teaching himself English, got a job delivering food, and one of the customers he was bringing food to for the store took an interest in him, helped him apply, get housing, apply to Columbia. He gets into Columbia University. From there, he gets into the Harvard School of Public Health. From there, he gets into Dartmouth Medical School. And he decided what he wanted to do with his amazing talents in his life was go back to his home country, Burundi, do reconciliation with the people who tried to kill him, and to start a hospital. And so for the last 20 years, he's raised $25 million to build really what's the best hospital in Burundi. I've been friends with him for 20 years, and he's one of the people when I see him, mostly what I do is applaud. He's just amazing. But I got on his board 2 years ago. The hospital was having 20 outages a day, okay? And so for the last year, I've been working with this team. We raised $500,000 to do a solar battery system. We just turned it on, the first phase of this 6 weeks ago. Now, no outages. And I just wanted to really lift up what you're doing by supporting projects like this around the world is making a huge difference. So let's say thank you to Sarah Rossi for the amazing work. Incredible. And supporting projects like this. But what I want to say is that, I think there's a very elegant alignment between what is good for resilience at important facilities like this hospital, or Josh, your amazing facilities you're supporting in New Orleans, what's good for climate, and then also what's good for actually mental health. I was so moved. There was a doctor, there's doctors from 13 countries working at my friend's hospital. And this one woman doctor from Uganda, when we were doing the dedication ceremony, she said, you have no idea the mental anguish that I'm in the middle of a procedure, I'm doing a C-section or a skin graft operation, the power goes out, It is affecting, it's causing infections that I can't see, And she said, that weight to finally be free of that, was amazing. So it just really brought it home for me. This thing, it's, I think solar plus batteries, it's really the most beautiful invention in the last half century. And so our job, we're at a time now where it's more affordable than it's ever been, okay? And so our job is to get it out there, and it's possible. And I just really want to say, what's happening at these local community levels, it can get it done quickly. And so it's really, really inspiring to just be a part of this incredible community doing this work around the world.
Very good. Thank you. All right. I am always cautious about standing between people and their lunch, but we might have time for a couple questions.
We've just had too many good conversations. Okay, I've got 2 questions, and then we'll be done.
Yeah, so I'm interested, perhaps Bernadette, if you could speak to what you were alluding to, losing hope. So as a homeowner, as a technology provider, renewable energy storage, the PUC has not really facilitated aggressive adoption of distributed rooftop solar and batteries. And someone said it's now 8 years for interconnection.
For utility scale.
Oh, utility scale. Nonetheless, as a homeowner, the interconnection waiting list is very long. And the challenges and some of the policies that were put into place, 4 or 5 years ago now, 20,000 solar installer companies went out of business and left the state. And so I'm just wondering if you could address some of the policies that have been put into place. Curtis Parks, the audit that was done on the PUC, and how they have hiked up rates, claiming it's for infrastructure upgrades, hardening of the grid, fire prevention. And yet this audit shows that no one has followed up, and the utilities very often have not used those monies from all of us to make those infrastructure upgrades. And the PUC commissioners are appointed by the governor, not to pick on anybody here in particular, but there's a lack of accountability. And so I'm just wondering, Bernadette, if you could speak to, is some of that the hopelessness and California getting it right or wrong, and what needs to happen to keep this movement going forward?
You said it all, but let me add to that. I mean, there are some things that California has done right. I think Christina's stories are paramount to that. But The problem we have right now in California is we have unchecked spending by these utility companies who are basically construction companies. They're not really energy providers so much as they're construction. And you're right, the PUC's own analysis is that the number one driver of rising rates is overinvestment or expenditures on transmission and distribution wires. PG&E alone, if you took all of PG&E's wires, you could wrap them around the circumference of the Earth at the equator 5 times. That's how much infrastructure they have built. We're not going to be able to underground our way out of wildfire risk, right? It's way too expensive to go that route. But they earn a profit off of every mile of that infrastructure that they build. And we haven't fixed that. And so that is a bit of a runaway problem, and it has created then a huge disincentive on the regulators' part to promote self-consumption and self-generation and community-based solutions. Like I said, under the PUC's own math now, this calculator that they have chosen to use in measuring community center resiliency programs values all of these self-generation technologies as a negative, whether they have storage or not. And so as a result, we are throttling all of these solutions and not funneling resources, or we're even going worse than that. We're sort of stepping in the way, and we're taxing these sources. A bill that just died yesterday in appropriations, the balcony one survived, thankfully, but one that died would have prevented individual consumers, middle-class Californians trying to get out from underneath these heavyweight utility bills, to prevent us from taxing those solar panels as if it is the same as expanding your home. So no property taxes for solar, something the voters embraced, something California voters absolutely embrace up and down the state. This is where there is public will, is putting these technologies in the hands of everyday people. But we've gotten ourselves a little backwards, and that's what we need to correct.
Just want to add on really quickly, too, there's a sense of myopia, right? They're looking, in these analyses, they're only looking at the impact based on the existing system, the transmission and distribution system as it exists today, and how that is spread across the ratepayer. They're not looking at the value the distributed energy resources provide in avoiding system upgrades, right? In avoiding cataclysmic events, providing resiliency value. And so it's just, again, like myopia is the perfect word. We're not seeing the forest for the trees. We're just staying in this lane that we've existed in for 100 years and really don't like to change.